logging in over the next couple minutes, but I just want to say good morning, Happy New Year. Wendy's recording us. If anyone has an objection to that, let us know, but this is just so that folks who can't make it to these meetings are able to view it at a later date. So let me share my screen and we will get going.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Kayla.
Okay, are you seeing this presentation mode?
Yep.
Excellent. So go ahead and put your rename yourself in your Zoom account so that we know who's who and your pronouns and what organization you represent. I know we're still getting to know each other in this format. I wish we were all together in a conference room or a setting outdoors in a park where we could get to know each other better, but we're doing the best we can here. So talking to each other over a little camera. So go ahead and rename yourself and we will move into our agenda, our survey follow-up and today's objectives. So at the end of each meeting, we put out a survey link, and thank you so much for those of you who are giving us feedback. It's really helpful. What we heard last time, this question, I know everyone's really antsy to get moving on these strategies. So what are the projections based off of 2030 recommendations, and how can we aim for sooner dates than 2050, or what would those milestones look like? And I know we're really eager to get there. I do want to let you know, just like all of you in your own organizations are doing this work to reduce our impacts and do everything we can. Our organization is as well. So we have all kinds of projects going on in our office that we would love to talk to you about and share with you and get you involved in. We need advocates from every direction. But in the specific recommendations and the timelines and the numbers, all of those details will be coming in the upcoming meetings. So you'll get to see more of those projections in the coming meetings. How do all the organizations at the table create a comprehensive team to cover all of the topics we need to tackle? Great question. And I think as this is an evolving process, so a lot of communications went into creating all of the work groups. And I think you'll see we have a pretty great cross section of stakeholders in these teams. So, you can certainly collaborate between meetings. We talked about that last time. I created that Jamboard that a couple of you have used. We have the contact lists. We want to do a couple things like one of the ideas is to have an open office hours. So maybe say Friday mornings every Friday morning from 9 to 10, I'll have a Zoom link that you guys could jump in on, anyone who wanted to talk about these things or ask questions, or you could ask me for some office hours and we can schedule a one-on-one or a small group meeting. We could have mini presentations, optional presentations between these meetings where folks can talk a little more specifically about how we can collaborate on some of these strategies. But all of that work, I think it'll start to make more sense as we continue the process. We start to outline our strategies and we get into the community engagement portion and then start moving forward on the plan itself. So let's see, breakout sessions are helpful, but it'd be nice to get to know everybody. So we are trying with each of these meetings. It's challenging, yes, but we are trying different things. So today we're going to have 3 breakout sessions of one-on-one conversations so that you can get to know, each of you should get to know 3 different people much better today. And then we'll have breakout rooms to do our activity on the equity tool, and you'll have a handful of folks in there. So these are just different things we're trying, but if you have any ideas, I would love to hear it. So let me just throw that out there if anyone has any questions or ideas about getting to know each other and collaborating. Okay, then we'll just keep moving on, but we're up for, open to any suggestions. So please let me know if you have additional thoughts on that. In terms of the agenda, we'll be settling in. Thank you all for being here and going over the ground rules next briefly. Then a previous meeting recap, opportunity for Q&A to make sure that we are all on the same page. And then we'll go into the equity screening tool, which is really the big activity for today, and then wrap up and next steps. So today's objectives are to further understand how equity, I know we keep talking about it, but it really is, it's a lot to take in and process personally. It's easy to talk about it, but you really have to think about it and process it in your own life, in your own work, in your own lived experience, and then think about how you will start to incorporate it into your own planning going forward. So that's why it's kind of a layered conversation. So we'll talk more about that, particularly racial equity and how it's central to the RVAgreen 2050 process. And then we'll ask for your input on the equity screening tool as one of the mechanisms that we'll be using to center equity in our work. It's an evolving systems approach to climate action planning, and it's critical to the long-term reinforcement of safety, justice, health, prosperity for all. These are, the big goals of all the work we do, but there's a lot behind the scenes that we need to incorporate. So in terms of ground rules, you've
Hey,
seen
Dawn,
these.
I just wanted to let you know, it doesn't seem like your slides are progressing for us.
Well, that's not good. I wonder why that. Yeah, I flipped screens and.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I wish someone had said something sooner. Yeah, so the survey follow-up, the agenda, and today's objectives. That's what I went through. I switched the screen so that I could see all my notes on the big monitor, and I'm sorry that you weren't seeing that with me. So this is what I was going over were the group expectations. And so again, this technical stuff is glitchy sometimes, but I'm looking, so it looks to me like my banner is in the middle of your presentation view. Is it the same?
No.
Or are you seeing it clearly?
You're good.
Seeing it clearly.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. All right, so group expectations, you guys are awesome. I know you've done this a lot over the years in your own organization, so just continue to be respectful, be present, participate. We're here to hear each other, not just to hear ourselves. And define new terms. We certainly want to learn from each other. So be sure that we are being clear when we're communicating about new topics. Okay, so next we are going to go into our first breakout room. This is going to be the first one-on-one, and we'll ask you to reflect on how equity has come up in your own work, life, etc. So Wendy's going to send you into those.
And you may have some of our staff in your group, so you might have 3, but anyway, here we go.
Thanks. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that was a good exercise on thinking about equity a little more from a personal level and sharing it with someone new. Does anyone have anything you'd like to share with some conversation generated that you'd like to bring up with the larger group? Because we'd love to hear it if you were inspired.
I think that inspiration today is not as high as it normally is, just because from our general conversation, it's the first of the year and it's like things are going
nuts.
Bananas. Yeah, nuts, bananas. Try to be organic. So yeah. So it's kind of like, oh, wait, hi. Yes.
You know, that's a great point, Priscilla. Absolutely. I think we're all trying to, kind of get into a space where we can do this work, but let's give each other some grace as well and recognize that we are all, doing our best, but there's a shared heart here. So I appreciate each of you for showing up. So I'll go ahead and move into the next slide, which is this RVAgreen 2050 integrated approach. So you saw this before, and this is, oh, that's not it. This is it. All right, so we've talked about centering equity into our work, and really want you to understand that the reason we're doing this, centering this equity, is because when we're planning out any future developments related to this climate action plan, when we're assisting residents, we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to prepare everyone to be more resilient and prepare them, give out, share the resources and the benefits to make sure that no one's increasing Richmond's carbon footprint. So centering equity is going to allow us to do that in the best way possible. And I'll get into a little bit more about how we're planning to do that in terms of a systems approach. So in terms of the timeline, we are moving into the orange circles, which is very exciting.
You need to advance your slide, Dawn.
Again, I'm so sorry. I have these two different, I can only do it this way. All right. So we're moving out of the understanding community priorities, the green circles, into the orange, the plan development. And very exciting. We're working on the foundation setting, and drafting strategies are coming up. We're going into 2-hour meetings. They've been an hour and a half up until now, but now that we're asking for a lot more input and doing the breakout rooms, we want to give you more time to have those in-depth discussions. And I talked about some ways that we might be able to collaborate between meetings for those of you who are interested in continuing the conversation. So office hours, you're more than welcome to call us at any time, send us emails, set something up. If you have a topic that you'd like to discuss, you have some kind of presentation you'd like to give, share some information that you think would be really helpful to the work of this team, we could set up an optional presentation, something casual on another day. So it's an evolving process, and we are completely open to your suggestions, recommendations, requests, all of the above. Okay, so the vision statement we went over last time, and what will Richmond look like when RVAgreen 2050 is implemented? We got some feedback at the last meeting. We really appreciated all that you guys, all of the thoughts that you put into it, and your questions and your comments. This on the right in the green box, that's some of the summary feedback that we received. It needs to be simplified. We were asking for a little more definition on net zero, carbon emissions, include other pollutants, things like that. What is green infrastructure? It's true. We want to make sure that everyone who's reading this, understands the definitions and knows what we're trying to do. And then some things like include food justice. Some felt like it was overly focused on humans and didn't necessarily discuss ecosystems or animals as stakeholders. So this is just some of the feedback. Did any of you have any additional thoughts that you'd like to share with the group after the meeting last month? Okay, well, thanks for everything you put into it so far. And just so you know, the roundtable is compiling all that information, and staff is going to be doing what we can to get it to its best version. So, any questions at this point? Okay, so now we're going to jump into the equity tool.
Oh, and Dawn, real quick, I put a link in the chat to the Jamboard that you created.
Oh, excellent. Yes, that's another easy way to collaborate, share information. Again, I'm trying to come up with some different tools since we can't meet in person. Do want to give everyone the opportunity to continue to collaborate between meetings. So the equity tool is an opportunity for us to create something that allows us to ensure that making decisions related to policy, planning, programming, and budgeting, advance racial equity and shared prosperity. So this is something that is going to help to guide the strategies that we're going to develop. And it's also going to hopefully be used by agencies, policy writers, you guys and your own organizations. It's a tool for us all to begin to incorporate these ideas into our work. So as we discussed last time, climate change affects some more than others. And the next 3 slides are reminders of why equity is so important and how it's being integrated. We know that the sensitivity to climate change and the impacts do affect some members of our community more than others due to a number of root causes, social factors, and biological factors. And these all increase sensitivity of individuals, at some more than others, to things like extreme weather, heat waves, flooding if you're closer to the James or don't have enough tree cover and infiltration. All of those things affect some more than others. And what we have seen when you compare the map of Richmond is that our Black and Brown communities are more vulnerable to climate change. So many of these maps end up looking the same. The one on the left is the Climate Equity Index with the vulnerability score, social vulnerability to sensitivity to climate change. And you can see that it looks a lot, the darker areas are reflected in our Black and Brown communities. So due to Richmond's history, whether it's measured in centuries, decades, years, months, weeks, or days, it's fraught with racism. And this has created systems that serve our community in inequitable ways, from education, healthcare, government, our natural resources. And people of color and people who have lower incomes are more likely to live in areas with less green space, have higher rates of health conditions such as asthma, and live in housing without air conditioning. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these maps looking similar. So our Black and Brown communities in particular face more harm due to crises such as climate change, and we've seen it recently with COVID. And for these reasons, it really is critical that our efforts to address climate change are carried out in a way that's inclusive of and protects our most vulnerable communities. Okay, so in terms of centering equity in our work, by centering equity throughout the planning process and the implementation for RVAgreen 2050, we can address these disproportionate impacts so that all members of the community are adequately prepared for the impacts of climate change and are empowered to do their part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're making a commitment here to correct our past harms or the city's past harms and prevent future unintended consequences. Certainly no one here wants to, or anyone wants to create future unintended consequences. So by addressing the underlying structural and institutional systems that are the root causes of social and racial inequities, then we can really create some change. So there are 3 areas to be thinking about in terms of centering equity. It's a framework that's used to guide our processes through these 3 components. So the first one's procedural, and that's this plan. And it's a process to create this plan by including all of the voices into the planning process that have not traditionally been included. So our team has invested a lot of time into our own equity learning journeys to prepare us for the making of the RVAgreen 2050 process so that it is as equitable as possible. And we're centering the lived experiences of Richmonders, especially those on the frontline communities of climate change, through initiatives like the Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable. And so we'll also be making sure that our community engagement activities are accessible later in the spring and fall, and would love any ideas that you all have on how to do that in addition to what we're already doing. The second one is distributional. And so with this component of equity, we'll be looking at the content we draft together for RVAgreen 2050 strategies and actions, and be thinking about who could potentially benefit from the strategies we come up with and who might be burdened. And so the equity screening tool that we'll be discussing today will be a document to help guide our thinking here and really help us to incorporate distributional equity in our processes. And then structural is the larger picture. And so this is closing the gaps so that race and economic status can't be used to predict life outcomes. It's our hope is that this work will chip away at the systems and structures that exacerbate the inequities that we see and will help close those gaps. But it's the hardest piece to tackle. And we know we won't solve the problems through this plan that nearly 300 years of racist and inequitable programs and policies have created. But we do hope to chip away at that and leave a positive legacy and lots of lessons learned for future public planning processes. So any questions at this point or anything else that my team would like to add to that explanation or conversation? Okay, I know it's a lot to take in, it's a lot to think about. So just please speak up if you have any questions or anything to add. So moving on to what is an equity tool? Well, this is both a product and a process. So all of these conversations are part of the process and of us thinking through these ideas and incorporating them into our work. So it'll be used to help us center equity in the actions and strategies that we draft together. It's going to be a document or a checklist. Different organizations have created different looking tools. So we want to create something that works for us and works for you, something that won't be put in a drawer somewhere. We want to make sure that it's really accessible and really useful. And it's a way to ingrain equity into our own thought processes as we develop strategies. And I heard it put the other day very well when someone said, a lot of times certain people are asked to be part of a conversation because they are the checklist. Oh, well, we had that person on the team, so we're covered. It's all been included already. And that's a lot of pressure for that one person to be the equity screen. We want everyone to be sharing that responsibility so that the people who are invited to the table can bring their other valuable experience. So it's a shared responsibility to begin incorporating this equity work in everything we're doing, and not expecting that someone else is going to do it, is going to be that representative. I hope I said that clearly. All right, so next, I'll just flip through some examples. This one is from Cleveland, and they had 5 main areas. And for each one, they had a series of questions for stakeholders to go through when they were developing their policies and strategies as outcomes of their climate action plan. This next one is from San Antonio, and this is a robust checklist system. And they have a citizen group who's responsible for overseeing their climate action plan. And they would go through this checklist with each strategy. The next one is from Portland, and this is a simpler list of 9 questions that the Equity Committee would look at when going through their existing climate action plan to make it more equitable. And so this is an example of how they applied their equity tool to their existing climate action plan. It's a little different from what we're doing because we're incorporating equity into our climate action plan, not screening it afterwards, but it's a similar concept. And so they created new objectives when using the tool and added new specificity after to their plan once the tool was implemented. Okay, so now we're going to go into our next breakout room. Wendy will be putting you back into hopefully different rooms of 2. If for any reason you're put into a room with the same 2 people, come back out to the main room and we'll send you somewhere else, because it's hard to do the breakout rooms and know who doesn't know each other yet. But this is very flexible and we're all just kind of trying to make the best of it. So we want to share your understanding of equity as it relates to climate and environment. So with that, I'll let Wendy go ahead and send you on your way, and you have 5 minutes for that great conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing you when you return.
Issues with climate change or issues with inequality
We showed
have been there for decades.
Well, I want to bring something up that's interesting. That north side neighborhood with the Arthur Ashe Park, the tennis courts, that's a landfill, is it not? And one time it flooded maybe 6 or 7 years ago up into the houses. It was disgusting. I lived there. It was like the grossest smell for like a half a year.
Yeah, so this whole side, I live adjacent to it, and we actually, the houses on our street, on the street next to us, are actually built on top of a dump, like literally built on top of a dump. And the Cannon Creek Greenway, which runs right through Richmond Henrico Turnpike and down to the river, and then out to the bay, that flows right through it. There used to be a spring where you could go and fill your bottles of water like you can over what I think it's on King William over and off of Forest Hill. And they had to close the spring because it was contaminated. So the folks that lived here who, after 95 was put in, it went from mostly white neighborhoods to mostly Black neighborhoods. They no longer had access to this really fresh water at the end of their street because the houses were built on a dump.
To that,
We're back in our main group now too. I didn't know if Dawn wanted to get restarted or not. Sorry. I didn't want to cut off your good conversation.
Oh, sorry.
No, actually,
Yeah.
I'm loving listening to this because I think this is what it's all about. And so, Jason, just a second, I think that there was a lot of great inspiration in the one-on-ones, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to have that here. We have plenty of time. So, so yeah, go ahead. If there was other inspiration, we'd love to hear it.
So, what I wanted to bring up is the fact that that same neighborhood that's on top of the dump, that was a historically Black neighborhood, is actively being gentrified. And I believe that this could work out to the advantage of the cause. That's it.
Excellent. Great conversation. I really appreciate that feedback. And yeah, you guys are really in touch with the, I know a lot of folks in this group are involved with recycling and waste removal and composting and litter cleanups. And so I feel like it's a lot of grassroots efforts and organizing. And these kinds of conversations are really helpful so that we can all get a better sense of, what it looks like throughout the geography of Richmond. Any other thoughts or information to share? Inspiration? Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll move into understanding community priorities. And again, these were the priorities as identified during our listening sessions. Last summer, Kendra Norrell from our office did a lot of listening from the communities on the front line of climate change and the organizations that are doing work in those communities. And so front and center, racial equity and environmental justice was identified as a community priority. And they're asking for more equitable engagement and communication front and center and tailored to their specific needs and wants. And then government accountability was a big one, wanting more of that, very process oriented. So that's why we're really taking our time with this process and making sure that we are incorporating all of those needs and wants so that our work can be accountable to the folks that are impacted by our work. And then there were 4 topical priorities. On the left, community wealth. That's things like living wages, jobs, economic development, education, training, green jobs. And then housing and buildings. That's mostly affordable housing resources and home ownership related to community wealth. And then neighborhoods is stuff like beautification, safety, green spaces, accessibility, walkability. And then finally, health and well-being. Of course, that's safety and health. So what we've done is taken those 7 community priorities and turned them into our equity tool framework. And the screening tool, again, is centered on those community priorities heard during the listening process. And so in terms of a product, there are kind of 2 formats. And there was an attachment yesterday in the email that I sent, and it has the short version, which is just a table. It's a quick decision guide. It has the 7 community priorities with the condensed version of the high priority questions and considerations for the planning process. And then there's the full equity screening tool with all of the questions and considerations to evaluate the extent to which the proposed climate action and resilience strategies that we will be creating include policies and the, sorry, someone trying to dial in. I want to make sure that we have everyone on. I know people have been bumped on and off a little bit the past couple days. So again, the full screening tool will be going over that together. It's to make sure that we're considering all of these priorities in our policies and programs and budgeting and centering equity as we're making decisions together. So this is a process. We're embedding a practice of equity thinking through both the creation and the utilization of this tool. So again, the 7 key questions that we'll be asking when we're thinking about this equity tool, does the proposed action promote racial equity and environmental justice? Does it reflect equitable engagement and communication? Does it demonstrate and promote government accountability? Does it promote community wealth? Does it expand affordable housing? Does it support safe and beautiful neighborhoods? And does it promote health and well-being? So we have a couple of roundtable members. I wasn't sure if anyone wanted to speak up here, since I know you guys have already put a lot of thought into this work that we'll be presenting to the group. Or anyone else from my team have something to say. Okay, well, with that, the next step is going to be to walk through the screening tool together. So why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break, give you all a chance to kind of regroup, take care of whatever you need to take care of, and we'll come back here in 10 minutes at 9:55, and then we'll jump into the equity tool Google document together. Okay, so we'll see you in 10 minutes. You all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Just so you know, this is the attachment. This is one of the attachments in yesterday's email. And so it's the vision and guiding principles, and then what is the screening tool and how does it work, just a little more background. And then this on the second page, part 1 is the quick decision guide. This is what it looks like right now, where it goes through the priority areas that I described earlier and those key questions and considerations. And again, this is a draft. This is what we're going to be, revising today. But the full content is what is, this is what it looks like. So all of these questions and bullets are going to be in the Google documents. And so Wendy has put that link in the chat so you can open that. So the way that's going to work is we're all going to be opening the same document, and we can all edit it at the same time, just like last week with the vision, or last month. but this is what it looks like just in a Word document, so you can picture, picture that. I think it kind of helps to kind of frame your thought around what the work is, or what the product's going to look like potentially. So the Google document, I will go ahead and show you. Are you seeing my Google Drive? No.
Googie D, no.
You're not seeing?
Saying community priority number 7.
Okay. Let me do a new share. How about now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So this is this is what the Google document looks like. And let me just jump back to the presentation real quick. Can you see the presentation view? The draft equity.
Yes, chef.
Yep.
Okay. So this activity is, what questions can we use to determine the extent to which each proposed climate action and resilience strategy in the plan prioritize equity as it relates to, and so this first one is that question, does the proposed action promote racial equity and environmental justice? So what you would do is, in this activity in the Google document, you're going to read through each of those bullets and you're going to consider what question that's trying to get at. Again, this is a draft. This is not a final document. We're all, we have dozens of people looking at this, adding input, because and the reason we're asking each one of you to contribute is because it needs to be useful. So you guys, folks, in all kinds of organizations, all kinds of offices, all kinds of agencies, we're asking them to be thinking this way. So we want to make sure that the points are easily accessible. So an example from the Richmond 300 strategy or plan is this 16.4C. It says continue funding programs to plant trees and educate the public on the importance of trees. Okay, sounds like a great idea, right? Well, how can we make sure that that activity or that strategy promotes racial equity and environmental justice? I don't know. Let's think about it. So maybe what communities would benefit most from the proposed action? Is that question good enough, or do we need to ask additional conditions? That's what we're asking you to consider. Does the second bullet is, does the proposed action generate burdens, either directly or indirectly, to historically disenfranchised communities? Things like costs or accessibility or displacement or others. And can the benefits of the proposed action be targeted in progressive, creative, proactive ways to reduce historical or current disparities? And if so, how can that reduction be measured? So to really get at making that strategy equitable, we need to ask ourselves some questions and think a little more deeply about how might we revise that strategy to incorporate the concepts of racial equity and environmental justice, considering where we would plant trees or how we would provide the resources or what benefits are needed and where are those needed in some more than others in order to improve racial equity. So I would love for someone else to ask questions or give more of a framework of how you think this could be used. I will also ask you to go ahead and open the Google document on your screen. And what you're going to be doing on that very first slide, on the right, you can click and drag the symbols to show the stars if you like a certain point. The second one is a question mark if you're not sure about this. And then the third one, I can't live with this, just drag an X over. And so take a minute to reflect to yourself on those questions or those bullets that we just went through together, and drag the symbols across to what you like, aren't sure about, can't live with, and provide feedback on what you think is missing or any other comments at the bottom of the page in the slide notes. And so we're all working on this document together at the same time. If for some reason any of you can't access it, let us know and we can type in your comments for you. And if you have any general feedback, there's a slide at the very end called feedback, and you can just add stuff in there in general about the tool. So I'm going to ask someone from my team to add any additional context to the equity tool and examples that you can think of that would help to explain what we're getting at, or someone from the round table.
So I can jump in if that's okay. So I guess the purpose of this activity is really to make sure that when we're thinking about the strategies that we have sort of an internal check. And I think yesterday when we were working with the buildings and energy group, a really good example came up where we were talking about the neighborhood priority. And some people said, you know, normally I wouldn't think that buildings and energy really is a function of the neighborhood level things. You know, we think about engagement, sure, or government accountability, but thinking about any strategies that relate to energy efficiency in buildings isn't necessarily something that we think about when we're thinking about beautiful neighborhoods, for example. And so it just gets all of the working groups thinking about these different priorities that are already identified by the community as important, and make sure that, you know, as we're thinking about the strategies to help us achieve our goal, we at least think about these different things. And so a lot of these questions can be, you know, prompts to make sure that the strategies are deep enough or consider a wide enough array of the community priorities. But I thought that it was a good example of sort of how to use this tool in practice and how to think about these different, you know, questions and prompts.
Excellent, thank you. So when you're thinking about, you know, how about an example that we might think of with recycling? Say we want to make sure that all multifamily apartment complexes recycle. Well, there can be some challenges with that. There could be, you know, contamination. I've seen that in some areas where we've done audits. Sometimes maybe there isn't enough education in a certain community about what's recyclable and what's not, or maybe there aren't enough trash dumpsters, and so they're throwing everything in the recycling, or all kinds of considerations you wouldn't necessarily consider. I heard another good example of taking bags. You know, if we had a bag reusable bag policy banning plastic bags, well, sometimes I've heard from a few different people that that there's a historic, how would I put this? When Black and brown members of our community take reusable grocery bags into stores, there is a concern, or they have been followed with the assumption that they're shoplifting. And that is disgusting that is a fact, but it is. And I've heard it a few times from friends. So, you know, making that, we have to consider all of these implications when we're trying to make big blanket policies. So how can we ask these questions in a way that would get at some of those inequities?
So as you, the recycling comment, so does that mean in some communities when you're introducing recycling concepts to these communities, you do things like cardboard only bins next to the trash cans, and then you're identifying those specific things and having it so that the slide is only wide enough for that, so people aren't putting the trash in? Like, so not only are we trying to make it equitable, but we're also having to make huge teaching moments in these things. Another thing would be with trees. If you're planting trees in neighborhoods, are you only planting trees that are going to be durable, because certain neighborhoods are harder on things? So instead of, like, they're giving out the trees, this tree saplings to 1,000 quadrillion people right now. However, they would not survive in certain neighborhoods just because of the amount of foot traffic and things like that. So then are you finding that we're now educating and putting more mature trees in areas that would not normally, so I live on North Avenue. I planted shrubs because I wanted a living fence in my front yard. One, so that the Dorito bags wouldn't fly into the yard as fast, but two, so people wouldn't cut through the yard as much. And it's working. However, I've also learned that certain trees aren't as durable because of that. And I am not a landscaper by any means. That's Jason. Yeah, see, but I'm a DIYer. I want to try and do and fix it myself. So I had to educate myself on what would work and what wouldn't work. Not everyone has that. So a lot of this equity and climate things are more of how can you simplify and educate certain communities in order to make it better. Because again, like with me, I'm just going to do what I think is right, but not everyone thinks the same way as I do. And I also put in the chat that, yeah, I don't walk around grocery stores with my reusable bags, and I'm the queen of reusable bags. I wait until after I'm done shopping. And because for that simple reason of, I don't want anyone to assume that I am stealing. And I tell my kids the same thing. So
Priscilla, thank you so much for sharing that. That just, it breaks my heart. And that's, something that we wouldn't necessarily know unless we were told that is the case.
I also want to add in there, I don't think it's for the most part, it's usually not the businesses. Like if I was to go into Aldi, I don't think the staff and employees at Aldi think it is. It's the people who are also shopping at Aldi. And because I have melanin in my skin, they assume the worst. And then, yeah, but it's also the same thing as I also get into my luxury SUV when I leave. And so now they're like, oh, because they think that I don't know, it sounds horrible. They're, oh, she must have got here on the DRTC and she is stealing. So they want to go and alert people of things that are unnecessary. But this is not the time for that conversation.
No, this is, because I think we, sharing those stories with each other as we're trying to develop these strategies and think these things through, it's very appropriate, and very grateful to have your lived experience, shared experience, your comments, and your assistance on this. So with that first one, I think we have a lot of great feedback, a lot of stars. I guess a lot of people like these questions as they are. If you have any suggestions on what would make the questions or bullets even stronger or better, or get at this lens, I guess, go ahead.
I wanted to say thanks, Priscilla, for bringing up education. That has been just moving around in my mind for the last couple of weeks since the last equity roundtable meeting and since our last meeting here. Education so often in these kinds of processes is left out, and it's left out to the detriment of the folks who would benefit most from the programs. And so if there's a way, and I totally forgot to bring this up, Kendra, if you're here, I'll send you an email. I forgot to bring this up the other day, but I think adding, what types of education and what kind of targeted education needs to be included in whatever program we're discussing. Maybe that should be one of the bullet points that we consider as well. And how best to educate those populations, which may or may not understand what's going on. Maybe that needs to be a consideration.
Excellent point. Why don't we jump to slide number 12. So this one's on neighborhoods, and I think that conversation is very appropriate to this one. Does this proposed action support safe and beautiful neighborhoods? So in my previous organization, we were trying to do a trash-free waterways initiative. And so we went into all these different neighborhoods representing different demographics. And we thought, okay, well, before we went into the neighborhoods, we said, this is what we want to happen for our location. We want to be able to make sure that no trash ends up in our ditches and ultimately our waterways. Well, as we started kind of spreading this desire in the community, we started learning that the education piece is totally missing. most people don't realize that every single piece of trash that leaves a kid's backpack or someone's car is going to end up in a ditch, is going to end up in a creek, is going to end up in the river and the bay and the ocean if it doesn't get stopped. And so just that little lesson alone. Oh, Jason's holding something up.
This book, if you guys, I'm happy to let anyone borrow it. It's Retro Suburbia. It's written by David Holmgren. If any you guys don't know who that guy is, he helped move the idea of permaculture around Australia and export it throughout the better part of the world. This book is full of these strategies she's talking about.
Very cool.
That's my plug.
I love it. No, that's exactly what we need to get at. So with this example, what we found is that we had to do some social marketing. We had to go figure out which outreach was going to or what strategies need to happen in the different neighborhoods. We couldn't just do a blanket strategy for the whole locality. So, safe and beautiful neighborhoods, please jump to that slide and go ahead and drag your symbols across. Could this expand access to healthy, clean, and accessible transport systems? Could this increase amenities and walkability in historically disenfranchised communities? Increase the quality of our green spaces in historically disenfranchised communities? So do these questions, go ahead and take some time to reflect to yourself, read through them, and think about if these questions are good enough, if this really gets at what we're trying to accomplish through our equity tool.
Dawn, this is Alicia. And just on this point about education, and Brianne, I'd love to ask you to help me with this, but I'd love to bring up a conversation that came up in one of the other working groups around this point, and it was in the environment working group. And one of the members of that working group raised a great point for thought and discussion just around the terminology that we use sometimes, which is the word education and educating people, is that it may not necessarily be a matter of educating people, but rather thinking about the people know what's happening in their communities, and it's really about connecting their lived experiences, especially folks that we think about from, what we think of as historically, vulnerable, disenfranchised communities. They're the ones that are impacted by trash in their communities. So they know what's going on. It's more about connecting their lived experiences with ways to help tackle these issues. And so just thinking about those of us in the fields that we work in, being a little more, aware of the words that we use and the impact that they have. And I thought that was a really great conversation that we had in that other working group, and just wanted to share that with folks here. And Brianne, I don't know if you have anything to add or.
No, not really. We definitely like to bring, the different working group conversations together. I think, Dawn, to your example, it would be sort of like, if we were to do some sort of litter reduction program here in Richmond that's neighborhood specific, the folks responsible for implementing that program would have the technical knowledge about how that would work. And when they go into neighborhoods, what this could look like is working with the people who live there to understand, okay, where are the hot spots for litter? What spots flood and take litter away to potentially other waterways, because often when we're working at the citywide level, we don't get to that granular level of detail. So just like Alicia said, bringing the lived experience and the expertise of residents together with the technical knowledge.
I want to point, I like that point you made, Brianne. I want to bring up also that it isn't just working with communities, it's working for communities. And I don't know what other word to use other than reparations, that we kind of owe it, that we should just be out picking trash without complaining about it up every day anyway. That's it.
Excellent. This is great conversation. I really appreciate all this dialogue. So on this slide that we're all working on together and looking at, I see a question mark next to the third bullet. Could this increase access to quality parks, green spaces in historically disenfranchised communities? There's a question mark there. Does someone want to kind of elaborate on that or ask your question?
So I actually added that one in, but I thought it's important to address like making sure that these communities also have long-term access to these new green spaces. So sort of like we talked about earlier, considering, you know, anti-displacement, property value implications, all that stuff. And so not just making sure that there are safe and beautiful neighborhoods in these, you know, in providing green space and stuff, but also that the communities who have lived there will have access to them once they're installed, if that makes sense.
That's a great point. I live at the end of Richmond Henrico Turnpike is at the end of my street, and it used to be a linear dump for decades. And then the neighborhood and a bunch of organizations got together and turned it into the Cannon Creek Greenway. And it's a beautiful running, walking, biking trail now that's going to eventually connect with the East Coast Greenway. And now our neighborhood is gentrifying. And though we're the folks who have lived here for a long time, and luckily a lot of the folks that are moving in and our city council person are very cognizant of that and trying to mitigate gentrification to the extent that it's going to push folks out. It's clear that the Greenway has now increased property values here. And the folks that struggle to get it built, there's a very real possibility that they're not going to be able to afford to live here and access this park at the end of their street any longer.
Yeah, great point. Great dialogue. I think this is the kind of thinking that we want to do to build on each other so we can really get to the right questions that we want to ask. So with that spirit in mind, we are going to continue. You'll have access to all of these slides, so you can come back to this at any time. But let me go back to our presentation mode here.
And Dawn and Wendy, I don't want to mess up your flow at all, but I'm just wondering, because this is a smaller group today, if it might make sense to do fewer breakout rooms potentially.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll move, I'll just take you off of being one of the people, if that's all right. And then if that's all right, or if you want to be one, I will leave you as one. Or I can take me off and move you to my room, either way. So, yeah. Okay.
No preference.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to do is go into breakout rooms, and let's see if I can pull up. Okay, so we did have Priscilla. Her group will be doing engagement and communication. And then David is government accountability. Wendy, are you, what did you choose?
I was going to be community wealth, and I think Brianne was going to be housing and buildings.
Oh, okay.
Just how I have it set up right now.
Okay, why don't you introduce where you're going to be sending people?
Okay, well, I have it the way you have it, with me doing community wealth and Brianne was doing housing and buildings, I believe.
Yeah, sorry, I have Wendy on here twice.
Yes. Okay. So some groups might only have 2 people in them for now without our staff. So
okay,
started out that way just because that's how it's set up.
These breakout rooms are confusing, and this is changing a lot. I'm seeing people coming and going a lot. So I think go into a space, and you'll end up with a couple other folks, and you guys can pick a slide. These are the ones we haven't gone over yet: engagement and communication, government accountability, community wealth, housing and buildings, health and well-being. So go through those together and add your comments. You'll have 20 minutes, and then we'll bring you back to the larger group. Any other questions, advice, suggestions, recommendations on how we want to do this?
I have everyone assigned to a room, but
Okay.
yeah, if they want to pull out, that's fine too. So, okay.
Yeah, so feel free to go to a room, and if you want to pull back out to the main group, we'll be there, and we're happy to ask questions or answer questions or continue the dialogue in the larger space. Okay?
Yep.
And then we'll see you back in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Coming back, hopefully that gave you some time to read through the bullets and really think about them a little more deeply. It's doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when someone's just talking at you about them. I think you need to process it yourself. So I was taking a look at some of the comments and saw some great feedback. So thank you so much. I noticed that it looks like we didn't have a group looking at affordable housing, and I don't see any comments on so the housing and buildings one and the community wealth one.
We
So
did.
if any,
Yeah, we did.
oh, you do?
Yeah. Well, we didn't put them on the big comment sheet, but we had them on our little feedback sheet. So yeah.
The community wealth?
Yes.
Oh, feedback. I just don't see any stars and questions and stuff.
Oh,
like that.
okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
We
No,
like
that's
them all.
great.
I'll
So
keep
as long
moving.
as they got some eyes on them, great. But I would also recommend that any of you that want to add some extra comments on some of the other slides that you didn't get a chance to work on today, please go in and work on that between now and I think Monday is when the slides will be kind of compiled and looked at together. So Wendy is going to put you in another breakout group, a small group one-on-one, so you can kind of hopefully end up with someone from other groups. If for some reason you end up with the person that you were just with, come back out to the main room.
Very many of
But-
us left. Let me see. Let's do
Well, you
four.
know what? Then let's just talk here. I know that this is a weird day and it's a busy morning. So I think people have had to come and go. I've been seeing emails coming into my inbox, reasons why people are having to come and go. So on behalf of everyone who's apologizing to me, I will apologize for them and thank those of you who are still with us for being here. But yeah, to your point, Wendy, let's go ahead and just have a conversation here. General feedback on what you saw, what you thought of the tool, what your questions are. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this question that we're supposed to be considering. So share how you see this equity screening tool impacting the work and topics of this working group. So as you are considering some of the examples that we talked about, how do you see that tool being used in this group as we're starting to come up with our strategies?
Okay. Oh, so we're not breaking out.
Nope, we're not.
No, sorry.
Okay.
We're just
Gonna
gonna
talk
stay.
here. It's a
No,
free
you're
for all.
fine. You're fine. Let's see.
You know, in the two groups that I participated in, or the couple of groups, it seemed like this tool was a great springboard in a lot of ways for expanding the conversation or bringing up aspects of whatever topic we were talking about that nobody's thought about. So that was super helpful.
Very, very helpful.
I think it's okay. Oh, my train of thought. Okay, so to a degree, we're preaching to the choir here because we're the people who care about this. And I think that we're not doing enough critical thinking about how we have to influence those of us who do not agree with us. I mean, I brought that up last time. But the fact is, we're almost in like a combative ideology war. And we're only talking about our tactics without the other threats to our tactics. That's it.
Great point. I'd love to hear someone respond.
I've got a little feedback on that statement. Like working in the technical field and with people that, you know, manage systems and facilities and processes that directly impact people around the Commonwealth. A lot of them tend to take pride in being very, you know, what they view as very objective and technical minded, scientific objectivity type of thing. And one thing I think that resonates is referring to the social sciences as social science, as psychology, as, you know, human welfare in ways that pitches it more in an academic sense. And a lot of the folks in high leadership positions, that resonates with them a lot more than some of the core principles. But I know it's appealed to authority to some degree, but it is something that resonates with folks in my experience.
I think in our group, and it was Dawn and I, well, and Kelsey until she had to go, but we just kind of created our own little example, just like we did in the big group, and kind of stepped through the different questions under community wealth with that. And we were able to, I think, really find it useful in doing that. And like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, it does that, or no, it doesn't do that, or, you know, that sort of thing. We had one question that we weren't quite sure what the intent was. So that's the one with the question mark on it. But overall, I think we found it, at least for our scenario that we created and for the principle that we had, community principle that we had, it worked. So.
And I think, you know, I'll add that I think it's not necessary for every project to have to fit into one of those, which it would be nice if this was a litmus test and it has to meet 5 out of 5 to be considered. But, you know, you could have a really good idea and that piece just doesn't fit. So to be able to even, you know, take that as a first pass for an idea, and then if it still has some merit, then then get in there and get to the nitty gritty of those questions a little bit closer to the actual project, and still make sure that it meets those points along the way so that you never lose sight, but you're also not fumbling around with things that don't make sense to that project anymore. I like it, and I figured that, I mean, it was very thought-provoking. I could see myself, and I guess I'm just this kind of person because I do judging of a lot of things, but I could see myself giving a project a 1 to 5 grade on how much it accomplished one of these points if it were a valid point. You know what I'm saying? If it fit the project and made sense, I'd love to know if people felt like it was going to accomplish it with little success or great success based on how it was presented, because the idea might not be, should be thrown out completely. It just might need some tweaking. And to gauge that, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, you've got some good around the average of 3.5. How can we increase it and make it better? Whatever, I'm done.
That's such a great example, Tracy. And I appreciate that because I'm very familiar with Keep Virginia Beautiful and all of the projects and programs. I mean, could you imagine if this tool was used to frame, you know, the project plan for every single initiative you guys do across the state even? So that's really neat to think of it that way. You know, I like that. I appreciate that a lot. I see Jason.
The way to get an objective scale along with the subjective sort of qualities.
Oh yeah, because they track all their metrics. There's a lot of
the only other thing that I thought I like seeing at the end of a project plan is a way to talk about whether it is replicable or scalable or both. And if so, how can we benefit other communities? How can we teach this to Fairfax, or Fairfax might not need it, you know, whoever, Roanoke, maybe these smaller communities that really, really, really need it. Wise County, they're like, I mean, you know where the populations are and the different needs they have, but making it a something that we can hand off to other communities to use is
that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I like it. I think if it's something that we can incorporate in our climate action plan, and then each of our organizations as stakeholders, now you guys are one group, but there are 5 groups plus the roundtable, and each of those is representing an organization or a department or a division or an agency. So there are a lot of people with their eyes in this, creating this together. And I would love because there's so much education involved, that I think then it's just like exponential, could go out and make even bigger impact. So I love this conversation. You guys, I my heart is with this group because they're all of the grassroots efforts that we all represent. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of interest, a lot of eyes on the ground here. So thanks for everything you're doing. Wendy is going to put a link in the chat that is our survey, so you can add some comments there. And I also want to share my screen again with this next slide. Go back through, reminding you why we're doing this equity tool. So as you remember, we have this framework. Equity, climate action, and climate resilience are all being centered. This nexus is what we're trying to get at. So as we're thinking about our strategies, addressing the community priorities, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and increasing resilience to climate impacts. That's really what this is about. And so the tool comes into this IE piece of the SMARTY, framework when you're developing strategies. So we want to make sure it's strategic, and measurable and ambitious and realistic and time bound, but to make sure that it's inclusive and equitable. The thinking that just went on in this collective is really impressive. And that brings in a really robust strategy that's going to be equitable and inclusive for all. So that's what this tool is all about. We have a workflow slide that kind of shows you what's next. Our climate vulnerability and risk assessment is going to be our next meeting, where we're going to go through the assets and really looking at Richmond and assessing as a collective technical group what we think the risks are, what are our vulnerable assets. And Ryan, I think that you'll be very helpful on that one. So we'll need everyone coming in with your own perspective on what the risks of climate change are to the assets that are most related to the waste working group. That's what we'll be discussing. And then in February, drafting the strategies. And then in March, revising them after they've kind of been around for feedback. And then we begin our community engagement phase. So a lot of work's going to be happening in the next couple months. We really appreciate your engagement, your time. So next steps, revisit that screening tool, the Google document. It's a living document. Everyone has access to it. Put your input in there. Has anyone here seen the Capitol Consulting Equity Foundation's video? Jason, what'd you think?
It was all right. I mean, again, there's a lot of preaching to the choir, but I found it informative to a degree, and I think it was something that many people should watch. Yeah.
Yeah, I found myself needing to watch it a few times to really think, because it's easy to hear it, but then to really process it.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like reading Camus.
Yeah. So
I liked it. And like anything, you're always going to gain a little something. I really have been thinking a lot about barriers, where they talk about the barriers, and here's the center, and then you've got these layers of barriers.
Yeah, excellent.
That's really been on my mind.
I like that.
So,
I like that. Yeah. And that, especially with this group, because litter, if we're talking about litter or waste management or recycling or composting, or any of these kinds of principles that we're passionate about, those barriers, that speaks to us. Okay, so watch the foundation's video. It's 40 minutes. I recommend you watch it. I watched it with my dad the second time, and he actually got something out of it, and then continued another really great deep conversation. So I encourage you to watch that again. And then our next meeting will be Thursday, January 21st, in 2 weeks at 9 a.m. That's when we'll go over that vulnerability and risk assessment and start drafting our strategies as time allows. So go ahead and enter any comments in that survey to help us improve for next time. And again, I know it was a tricky morning. Thank you so much for those of you who stuck with us. And I hope you have a great day. And I'll stay on this call if anyone wants to linger and comment or ask questions.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.